right. Hello and welcome back to the Second and Two podcast. I'm your host, TB. I'm rolling with my dude over here, Jody High Roller.
Fun fact, I seen that dude at the Flamingo one time.
The
In
Flamingo.
Vegas. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
What do he
we were
look like in
checking-
person? Is he just as crazy as he looks like on TV?
I seen the back of him. So like it was, on his legs it says riff and on one leg and raff on the
Riff-raff?
other. And he had like a backpack on. I was like, bro, no way. And then this fool turned his head, you
riff-raff.
could just see. I was like, oh, that's definitely him. And then he like walked off after he checked in.
No, that's funny. That's super funny. So we're here. We're back today. Took a little break after all our hard work with the NFL draft, but we're back to talk about the draft a little bit. Also, we're only a couple days away from the NFL schedule release. I think we'll be talking about that the next time we hop on. Definitely checking out what games we're going to be excited for. So stay tuned for that. Probably next week. But for now, we're looking at the NFL draft. Joe, is it just like looking at the draft overall, based on our experience now doing all our work and our mock, what did you think? I mean, our mock wasn't like the greatest.
Well, I will say there was obviously some crazy things happened, right? There's people traded back multiple times, people trading up, people trading their like, I don't know where I was going with that one. But it was just crazy to see it all play out. Obviously, we went with just no trades being involved in general. So that was tough. What else happened? We've seen some people fall, some people rose, some bunch of things happened overall that just, we didn't expect in terms of whether it was a trade or in terms of someone's like draft stock, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fun part about the draft is its unpredictability. I think that's why everyone loves watching the draft. Is one, you get to see guys, and their dreams come true, and then two, you get to see how NFL teams think and how each team is thinking differently, what they prioritize in team building, and then where guys' boards stand, in terms of like, hey, the Lions clearly had Jahmyr Gibbs really high on their board. I'm sure we're going to talk about that. Versus like teams maybe didn't have Will Levis as high on their boards as a lot of people thought. So, I think from that standpoint, that's what keeps the draft probably one of the more entertaining moments of any offseason in any sport is the NFL draft. I mean, I think that's probably the most hyped up one.
That's true.
The NBA lottery and the NBA draft are probably like close, but not quite the spectacle of the NFL draft, right? So I would say that the NFL draft probably takes the cake in terms of any offseason event in any American sport, just because of how unpredictable it is. I think that's a big part of it. I mean, you look at our mock draft, we only got 2 picks right, and saying we got two, I was gonna say saying we got 2 right might be kind of a stretch. I mean, we correctly predicted Bryce Young to the Panthers and Will Anderson to the Texans. We just had them going back to back 1 and 2, and instead they went 1 and 3. But I'm just going to give us a win on that. Like, we got 2 guys going to 2 right teams. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, close enough. So I'm giving us 2 correct picks there. We did correctly predict 24 of the 31 players that would be selected in the first round. So we were pretty close to knowing who actually would be a first round pick.
Yeah.
Guys that we had in round 1 that actually dropped out. Trenton Simpson ends up being a 3rd rounder. Michael Mayer, 2nd rounder. Brian Branch, 2nd rounder. Osiris Torrance, 2nd rounder. Will Levis, 2nd rounder. Joey Porter Jr., 2nd rounder. And then Hendon Hooker fell to the 3rd. So most of the guys that we thought would be first rounders were, and the guys who we didn't think would be first round, or that we did think would be first rounders that weren't, didn't go any later than the 3rd. So we were close in terms of our analysis of guys who we thought would be first round picks. But in general, I thought, as tough as the NFL draft can be to predict, especially considering traits,
Yeah.
and all of we said when we did our mock that was going to happen, right? We knew.
Yeah.
So in terms of that, I thought we did a really good job for our first and hopefully first of many annual mock drafts here at the Second and Two podcast. Let's get it started though. We're gonna play a little game of NFL Draft 21 questions. I don't know that we'll actually get to ask 21 questions today, but Joe, I'll start with you first. I want to know a little bit of the swag check. Who had the most swag day one, coming up to the podium, hugging the commish? Who was swagoo up there, bro?
Yeah, so there was. I'll break this down in different like tiers or classes, however you want to.
Oh wow, we got tiers,
Like, you want
bro.
me?
This
You
is a
want me to
treat.
like group them? You know what I mean? So my honorable mention first off is gonna go to Joey Porter Jr. I mean, at the end of the day, he wasn't a day one guy, so that's like the main reason, right? I guess I should throw. No, I think he's the only one. Never mind. And so the next like group of dude, or I guess it's a dude, will be the flashiest guy that was there, right? So we had Jordan Addison. My dude rocked like a pink suit. He had some shades on. There was some flowers all up on the the 3 goggles. Flowers all up on his suit with like a chain on as well. My guy just
The
his
glasses
outfit was just over.
inside
Yeah,
is
exactly.
always a bold move.
Bro.
It's always a bold move to pull off the glasses inside.
And then the classy people that were there, right? We had our guy Bryce Young, first overall. He was rocking a pink suit, at least what I would call pink. People were calling it mauve, which I think is like a purplish. And then he had like a little chain on, nothing too crazy, right? Looked clean. Anthony Richardson was the other guy in this group. He was rocking an all gray suit with the chain on as well. Everyone had chains. They're all gonna look different.
We need to get a chain for this podcast. Like I need a chain that says like Second and Two.
Yeah, I was thinking just like a down marker or something. And so the best dressed, there was 3 people in here. One of them, I didn't really remember what he was wearing. That was Paris Johnson Jr. I'll have pictures of all these dudes as I talk about them, so he'll pop up right now. But the Christian Gonzalez, he was rocking all white on his suit, and he had a chain on as well. Hard to describe which one. They're all going to be a little different. And then these other 2, they were rocking very similar stuff. It was B. John Robinson and Devin Witherspoon. They got all black with a chain on, letting the ice speak for itself while like looking swaggy. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's all the dudes that I'm gonna bring up. That's a lot. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 dudes out of 31. So it's a lot to look at. But I'll have that all popped up when you guys are watching. And yeah, that's the swag that was out there.
I think my personal favorite was Jordan Addison.
Yeah,
the glasses, pulling off the glasses. That's I just feel like he walked across the stage, and the only dude who I can remember being swaggier is his new teammate Justin Jefferson. Feels like those two are going to get along really well in that receiver group.
Yeah, so you briefly mentioned it, and I was giving my long drawn out explanation of people rising and falling. But how do you think that played out for Will Levis with his draft stock rising so much, and then just to see him fall down to like the second?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people, made a big deal of this, of course, right? I mean, he was the story of the weekend, being a guy in the green room. There's always one guy who gets invited to sit in the green room that ends up falling and not going as high as people thought that he would go. And unfortunately for Will Levis, that happened to be him in this instance. I mean, I think in terms of, why did he fall? What happened? I think he was hyped by the media as a top pick. And I think a lot of people thought the Colts wanted him at 4. I mean, that was a thing that was put out there months ago. Yeah. Like literally in March, people were talking about, okay, Will Levis to the Colts at 4. That's a thing. That's happening. And it was talked about like, if he's there, they're taking him. And
I've seen those.
I think this is a situation where both the Colts and Texans liked Levis. I don't think it was like the Colts and Texans didn't have that guy as a guy that they valued on their board. I do think both teams liked him, but I also think they clearly didn't like him more than the guys they selected. Right?
That's
so
true.
like hey, we really like Levis. He may have been top 5 on their board, but all it takes is for Anthony Richardson and CJ Stroud to be 3 and 4 on that same board. And now they're not taking 2 of them, right? And they're not like, you know what I'm saying? Like that's not gonna happen. So at that point, once they've taken their guy, they've taken their guy, and now they are no longer a team eligible to take Will Levis at that point, or
True.
you know, with the possibility of taking him. And so I think everyone, unfortunately for him, everyone below those 2 teams in the top 4 clearly didn't see him as valuable. Yeah. And so this is where everyone's draft board being different comes into play, because, you know, while you and I can do our mock draft and we realized how different you and I saw some stuff while we were doing our mock, you know, now multiply that by 16, because there's, you know, 32 teams in the league. And now we're talking about, okay, there's all these different teams with these different mindsets. On somebody's board, Will Levis is 34, and on somebody's board, he's 4, right? Like that shuffling of the deck. Now it's just about who's up with the ability, with the need to take a quarterback or thought to take a quarterback, and where they value Levis in comparison to also other guys, right? So like there may have been teams that thought he was a top 10 player in the draft, but those teams liked another quarterback a little more, already have a quarterback, right? We always hear the story about the team that like has, you know, Patrick Mahomes, for instance, and they're like, hey, Will Levis, we thought that guy was really good. We just don't need a quarterback. We have Patrick Mahomes, right?
Yeah.
So then there's also the team that maybe does need a quarterback, a la maybe the Titans in round 1, that pass just because there's another player that drops to them that they value so highly, they don't feel like they cannot take that player in favor of Will Levis. True. So I'm not sure this was some indictment on Levis as much as he didn't land in one of the places that valued him early. And it's clear, you know, he wasn't like a clear-cut prospect. You know, he had some issues with his accuracy. We detailed those things in our quarterback pod. Also, he had a big drop-off from his 2021 to 2022. So I'm not saying he was a perfect prospect that just was unlucky, but I think there's some element of that. And, you know, when you put all that together, you know, he lands with the Titans. That was a team I thought might take him at 11. Yeah. It's an interesting situation because, and you and I have kind of talked about this previously, but, you know, they have 3 guys there that I don't think any of them have like this huge vote of confidence from the staff, right? You have Tannehill, who got the big contract a few years ago based on his play. You know, originally was signed, I think, almost as like a holdover. Yeah. Like, okay, we need one this year. We'll sign this guy Tannehill from Miami. He comes in. He's actually pretty good with Derrick Henry. All of a sudden, he puts up a couple big years, and then they're like, hey, let's give this guy a real deal. And so now they've given him that real deal, but that real deal is near up. And now in the last 2 drafts, they've drafted his replacement 2 years in a row. Right, so that's not a huge vote of confidence for Tannehill. He'll probably be the starter this year, but I think beyond this year, they're looking to move on. Yeah. Okay, then you also have Malik Willis, who was so bad last year that a year later they drafted another quarterback. Like normally, if you draft the quarterback, you're like, okay, this is our guy. We're gonna give him a couple years. We'll see what happens, and then if he doesn't work out, we draft another one. Yeah. They didn't even wait. They drafted another quarterback the next year and a round higher because they clearly do not feel great about Malik Willis as the guy moving forward. Otherwise, they would not have taken Will Levis. So,
on top of that, they picked up our guy Josh Dobbs to come in and play at the end of the year over him. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. I mean, last year he was so bad they had to bring in Josh Dobbs off the street, who I always liked Josh Dobbs out of Tennessee. But you know, let's be real here. Like Malik Willis was in the building all year. If Josh Dobbs gets signed off the street to come play in a must win to get them to the playoffs, that's not a great sign for Malik Willis. I know he's a rookie, and I know we knew he had a lot of work. That's why he went in round 3. But certainly not a great start to his career. And now then you have Levis and the Titans. You might be saying, oh, well, okay, well, the Titans, they like Levis. You know, like what's the problem there? Well, they could have taken him at 11. And they didn't. And regardless of what they say, if he was their guy and they were sure he's the franchise quarterback, you take that guy at 11. You don't wait till the second round and hope that he's there. Yeah. So clearly, no matter what they say, you know, you heard the Titans were trying to trade back up into round 1 to get him. They just couldn't find the partner, yada,
Yeah.
yada, yada, whatever. I don't buy any of that. I think they saw the same flaws that a lot of other people saw, and they were like, well, if he's there in round 2, we'll take him then. But we don't believe in him enough to take him at 11. So no matter what, this feels like an interesting situation with the Titans where they have 3 guys that I don't know that they are in love with any of the 3. And they'll say what they want publicly, but based on the way they just ran their draft, I'm not sure that that's entirely true, whatever they may say about these guys. So it's an interesting situation. We'll see what happens in the next couple of years with the Titans quarterback room. Kind of feels like this is Tannehill's last year, and then next year will be Willis versus Levis. Yeah. Whoever wins the job, that's the guy, and they're going to let that guy be the guy for a couple of years until they know and have an answer whether or not he actually is the guy. So I don't know, Joe. I mean, what do you think?
I think out of all the quarterbacks, he's probably the luckiest one, right? You know, you fall down a little bit, there's not nearly as much pressure for you to perform, especially in the first year. So that's a positive if you want to do a little spin zone on that. I think at the end of the day, you know, like I think it makes more sense to take him later in general. I had a lot of question marks on him. It's just like you mentioned it, is if you don't have the confidence in him in the first round, then like how confident are you? You know what I mean? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say this. From his perspective, he should look at the bright side. His agent has likely told him this by now, but first round picks get the 4+1, right? So it's 4 years on the team, plus the team gets to add that 5th year option where teams can exercise the option, and now they have you under contract, rookie contract for 5 years. Yeah. Teams don't get that in the second round. So if Levis is good, he'll get to his next contract much quicker than the other quarterbacks in this draft who will have to play through that 5th year option before they can get to their first contract. So Levis, from the bright side of falling is, hey, you can get to that second contract, get paid a little quicker than any of the other guys. So
true.
So I do want to ask you, I mean, we saw a lot of teams, everyone's kind of adopted that we don't need first round picks sort of motto, trading picks for players.
Yeah.
A lot of teams had 2 first round picks on the first day. Those teams being the Eagles, the Seahawks, the Lions, and the Texans. Felt like those teams kind of controlled the draft on day one, maneuvering and having those 2 first round picks. Which of those teams do you feel like had the best day, Joe?
So I think there's a solid tie, maybe an edge to one or the other, but the Eagles and the Seahawks, I think, did the best, right? So the Eagles got Nolan Smith and Jalen Carter, and then the Seahawks ended up with Jackson Smith and Jigba and Devin Witherspoon. I mean, we were both high on both those dudes on both of the teams that were selected, right? But if I had to keep listing them, I'd say the Texans came in third in this with Will Anderson Jr. and C.J. Stroud. Although I do feel that, it was risky to jump back up that quick, right? To go to 2-3, you got to give up all the capital. So that's kind of tough for what they did, like going down the road. But just in terms of this draft, those 2 dudes would be the next group of dudes I like. And then lastly, the Lions with Jack Campbell and Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't know. For them, it was just like, first off, there's a lot more talent on all other teams, for one. But 2, it's like Jahmyr Gibbs, we had him being like a late first, right? Maybe early second. Jack Campbell, I think, was a similar deal. I mean, I like Jack Campbell, don't get me wrong, but I feel like there's also better linebackers in general. Like, I see him as like a field general, which makes sense, right? Have him lead the defense in a way, but also at the same time, it's like, I think there's better linebackers still, you know what I mean? How do you feel about the people who won the first round with the 2 picks?
I would say I just kind of go team by team. The Eagles just addressed and attacked their needs, right? They got Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith. I mean, two guys that are going to help their pass rush. They're going to replenish some of the guys that they're either going to, either lost this year or probably are planning to lose the next offseason. I mean, if you're a team and you're team building where hey, we're going to probably lose this guy in a year, we've drafted his replacement already, that's when you're in a good spot. And I mean, Howie Roseman got a lot of love in this draft, and understandably so. So I'm not going to love them up too much, but like I thought that those two picks were value where they got them, right? Jalen Carter at 9, Nolan Smith at 30. Those are both guys that conceivably could have been picked much higher. And the Eagles got them in valuable spots. The Seahawks, I mean, Devin Witherspoon, I was a player I fell in love with on film. Absolutely love his grit, but mix that with the playmaking. He's tough as nails, but he's also a playmaker. You just don't find corners like that very often. It's usually one or the other. Despite that, I actually had him as my second best corner just because I love Christian Gonzalez and his like length and playmaking, just a little bit more. Not that I disagreed with the Seahawks taking Witherspoon. I do think it goes against their profile a little bit. They generally love the long, big corners in the Pete Carroll, John Schneider era, and they took Witherspoon, who's a smaller guy. So it was a little surprising from that standpoint, but I love the pick. Jackson Smith and Jigba at 20. He was also my second rated player at the position. I had Addison at 1 and Smith and Jigba at 20, but also similar in the effort, grit, toughness play style that Devin Witherspoon has. It was clear the Seahawks valued that toughness aspect along with the playmaking and the talent of those two guys. The Seahawks got a lot better, I think, getting both those guys at important skill positions for them. The Lions, I know people probably did not like the picks because of the positions they chose. They're not, and those not being premium positions. You mentioned it, linebacker, running back, feeling like you could have got those guys later. At the same time, I think it's very obvious that Dan Campbell and their GM, who I'm blanking on his name, Brad Holmes, are building a specific kind of team where they value very specific things. The things they value: physicality, toughness, and speed. Those are it's just clear that's what that team values. You look at their draft picks: Jameson Williams, Aiden Hutchinson. Like those guys, even though those guys are the premium positions that they took last year, you look at Campbell and Hutchinson are very similar kinds of players in terms of the playmaking and athleticism mixed with like real Detroit toughness.
Yeah.
Big Ten defensive football players, right? And then you look at Williams and Gibbs, both from Alabama, SEC speed, unreal playmaking, right? So I feel like you can see what they're trying to build. And so even though they're not premium positions, I think they got players that Phil needs and fit what they're trying to do. So I do think that they were successful from that standpoint, even though their picks may not have been as sexy. And then the Texans clearly took the biggest risk of all these teams, jumping back up to 3 to kind of take CJ and Will Anderson. This draft is going to be looked at one of two ways for them. Either both those guys are going to be franchise cornerstones, and people will look at this as the draft that turned their entire franchise around, or it will be a failure. I mean, that's pretty much, if both those guys aren't good, it's kind of like, man, we messed that up, right? Because if Stroud isn't good, but Will Anderson is, then you can just say, man, we should have just taken Will Anderson at 3. We wasted all the capital to get up to take Will Anderson. We could have just had him at 2 and took someone else at 12 and then waited the next year to draft one of those awesome quarterbacks that we know is coming through, Drake May, Caleb Williams, etc. Right?
True.
Or if CJ's awesome, but Will Anderson's just like, as a pass rusher, people are going to be like, man, why did we do that? Why did we trade up all that capital to go get Will Anderson? I mean, they gave up a lot to go get him. So no matter what, those guys both have to be great in order for this to be looked at as a success. And I think they both could be. I also think they could both just be like good. I mean, I think there's a world. I think there's a world where both those guys are good, but not necessarily great. And so I'm a believer in Will Anderson. I truly think he's going to be spectacular for them in that DeMeco Ryans defense. CJ, I'm a little less inclined to believe he's like a franchise-changing quarterback. I think he could be good. So we'll see. I mean, if I had to pick a winner of the 4, I might say Seattle. Yeah, that's probably where I would lean. But I think they all did well. It's hard to have 2 first-round picks and mess it up completely. So I think they
even
if
they one
did well.
Seems a little out there, the other one's probably definitely very solid.
Yeah.
But we briefly talked about it right now too, with the Eagles picking 2 defensive dudes, right? Both out of Georgia. Why do you think that the Eagles continue to get people from Georgia? Also, another question for fun. Do you feel like Georgia could just put their defense in the NFL now and just do well?
So I'll answer the second question first. I did actually just see, and it's not surprising. I thought it sounded right even when I saw it before I knew it was true. The entire Georgia 2021 defense is in the NFL. Was drafted, and not just in the NFL, drafted.
Yeah. Dang.
Drafted. The entire starting defense from there. That's 11 players. Think about that.
Yeah.
You had zero weaknesses. Every guy on your defense was an NFL player. Kirby Smart deserves all the credit in the world for what he's done at Georgia and his recruiting. It's unbelievable. They have built up a juggernaut, and it doesn't look like it's going away either. I mean, that thing's going to keep rolling for a little while here. So, to answer the second question, yes, they could just put their whole defense in the NFL. It'd probably be okay. To answer the first question, in terms of, do I think the Eagles are going into the NFL draft going, all right, guys, our top of our board are all Georgia players. These are the guys we want? No, right? No, I don't think their draft board is like exclusively Georgia players.
Yeah.
But I will say this. The schematic approach that they have defensively, combined with what Howie Roseman values from a talent perspective, I think is what has led to this. You look at where all these guys were drafted. I just got through talking about this year's draft. You know, they get Jalen Carter at 9. Arguably, he's the best player in the draft. We talked about this. You know, I had him ranked in my big board. I think I had him ranked at 9 specifically because of all the other things going on with him, not his talent. Not his talent, right? His talent puts him probably somewhere in the top 3, at least, right? So you get him at 9. That's a value pick. And you know you're replacing Javon Hargrave. You're getting Jordan Davis back. You have Fletcher Cox, right? You put all that together, it's a recipe for success. Then they draft Nolan Smith at 30. That's a guy who some people before the draft were talking about, and some people, I mean us, our mock draft, were projecting him to go in the top 10, right? Like that was a real thing for him, and I don't think that was smoke. I think that was real possibility. He's a really good pass rusher. I mean, I think I saw some other deficiencies, but I also comped him to who? Hassan Reddick, who had his most successful year of his career in Philly. So, like, again, there's that idea of like scheme fit, players that they like, certain body types. I think those things are all shown up. Then you look at last year's draft, they get Nakobe Dean in the 3rd round, who I had as the highest graded linebacker of my board. I thought he was the best guy. I thought he could have been a borderline late round 1 pick, definite round 2 in my mind. He goes in the 3rd round. I mean, they got a steal. He didn't even really play that much for them last year because, again, they were drafting a year ahead and knowing that they were going to lose Kaiser White and TJ Edwards in this year's free agency, whatever. They already went and got Nakobe Dean last year, and now he's going to be ready and rearing to go this year. I think Howie Roseman's doing a great job from that standpoint. And then Jordan Davis, where they were able to get him in the middle of the 1st round last year. And then finally, you look at Keely Ringo this year. They got him in the 4th round. Now, when we talked about the corners, he was my 5th rated corner. I told you there were some issues, there's some things that I didn't like about him, specifically as a corner. But as a football player, the reason he was in my top 5, I love him, his instincts and the things that he brings to your football team. I think in Philly, he may end up playing a safety and actually being a really good player. Those were all guys. All 5 of those guys were ranked higher on my big board than, or at least as high than like where they were taken. I think the only guy who wasn't higher was Carter, who I had at 9, was taken at 9. But even then, talent perspective, I explained how he's a much higher talent than where he was picked. Yeah. So all the other guys are picked lower in the actual draft than they were on my big board, and I'm assuming Philly's big board, right? So yeah, I think it's that, and in combo having some success now with UGA players, right? Them fitting schematically, and then just being smart, drafting high-level talent in areas of value. I just think it's a thing that has sort of happened, and now it's a thing. Now there might as well be the Philadelphia Bulldogs on defense, and I wouldn't be shocked if it continues, especially if they keep having success. Why would you not keep drafting Georgia players? Yeah, but I could say that probably for any team in the league right now. Just draft Georgia players. You'll probably be okay.
True. You just got to follow the blueprint, right?
Yeah. So we talked about the teams that had 2 first-round picks. I am curious, of the teams that only had the 1 pick, like all the other teams, who do you think had the best day 1 in the draft?
Oh, this one I had a tough time deciding between just one team, so I'm gonna give you two. First
Okay.
one
Two for the
makes
price of one.
perfect sense. We got the Titans with Peter Skoronsky. Like they just lost their dude Taylor Lewan, right? They cut him.
Mm-hmm.
So granted they need that left tackle, but also he could play anywhere across the line. So worst case scenario, he's gonna be fit in at guard, maybe even center need be. But that just makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. And the other one I liked was the Ravens with Zay Flowers. They picked up another receiver after getting OBJ, right? So it makes perfect sense there. You could let him run the slot, pair him up, give our guy Lamar Jackson more toys now. Now that he's on the team officially,
Yep.
got the contract. So yeah, they're gonna be looking nice on offense now. They got Mark Andrews, OBJ, Zay Flowers, Josh Dobbs. That's the running back, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, man, I do like the Zay Flowers pick for the Ravens. I love Zay Flowers. I was a big
Yeah.
Zay Flowers fan in the pre-draft process. I think he's gonna be, he'll be a legitimate dude for Lamar. I mean, my favorite day one pick was Christian Gonzalez at 17 to the
Yeah.
Patriots.
I mean, I
Thought
like that one too.
the mixture of what he's capable of with New
Billy
England
B.
being able to, New England being able to put out corners, just like they're like the way the Steelers are with receivers. That's how New England is with corners. It just,
Yeah.
they always have a good one somehow, some way. It doesn't matter where they were drafted, how long they've been in the league, where else they've been. Like, those dudes are always successful somehow. Bill Belichick just knows how to get the most out of corners. So I love Christian Gonzalez at 17 to the Pats.
Mm.
But
Yeah,
I do
like
love
that.
Zay Flowers and Peter Skoronsky, my number one tackle on the board. I guess he was 1B. I really struggled with him and Paris Johnson,
Yeah.
who I liked better, but love both those guys. I mean, the Titans getting him at 11, yeah, that's a really good pick too.
Yeah, I was gonna see. Well, out of all the rounds, you talked about Christian Gonzalez being your favorite guy in the first round. What was your favorite dude from each round of the 7?
Okay, cool. Yeah. So I said Christian Gonzalez in round 1. That was my favorite pick
Yeah.
of round 1. I really already said everything I need to say. Just Bill Belichick and Christian Gonzalez, I think, are a great marriage. In round 2, I love Brian Branch to Detroit. This is a popular one, I think, for a lot of people because it felt like Brian Branch should go way higher than 45th overall. He was number 24 on my big board. The Lions needed a tough physical slot guy who could also play some safety, helped them in the secondary in general. They also need another corner, but getting Branch at 45, I thought that was an unbelievable value pick. And again, just like I talked about with Gibbs and Campbell, Brian Branch fits them, right?
Yeah.
And what they're trying to build. It's that tough and a very good athlete. I mean, so I like that pick for Detroit. I like that pick for Brian Branch. At round 3, super difficult. I think this may be the greatest round 2 through 4 draft we've ever seen in terms of this. Like, there's going to be more starters and like real productive players that come out of the middle of this draft than I think we've seen in a long time. I just think there were dudes going in round 3 that I was like, man, in another draft, that guy might have been a first round pick.
Yeah.
Like, seriously, like there's some really, really good players going in round 3. So it was a really difficult round for me. I think my favorite guy, though, had to be Trenton Simpson going to Baltimore at 86. He was the number 19 player on my big board. He was a guy we had going in the first round of our mock draft. I think he fits exactly what Mike Macdonald wants to do defensively. Perfect complement to what they do with Roquan Smith. And right now, Patrick Queen may be the long-term replacement, I think, for Patrick Queen, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I just think he can play off-ball linebacker with Roquan, but then he can also go line up on the line of scrimmage and be a pass rusher. He can do all kinds of different things. Mike Macdonald's going to have a lot of fun with him. They have a really young, fun nucleus in their front 7 on defense right now that Mike Macdonald gets to play with. They got Ojabo from Michigan. They got Roquan that they traded for last year. Drafted Patrick Queen a couple years ago. They draft Trenton Simpson. Like, they've got a lot of dudes up in that front 7 that I think are really fun, dynamic players. I also liked Byron Young to the Rams at 77. He was number 35 on my big board. So just wanted to mention that one. I think that's a really good pass rusher that the Rams got that will be able to play for them pretty quickly. So in round 4, I mentioned him a little bit ago here, but Keely Ringo to Philly at 105. He was the number 34 player on my big board. He fits the physicality and durability of the Eagles defense. Like I said, I feel like he could play safety for them. And then I also really liked Clark Phillips III, the corner from Utah, going to the Falcons at 113. He was number 47 on my big board. In round 5, a lot of people probably did not like him as much because he was a smaller guy, but I love the Alabama pedigree. Henry To'oTo'o, a linebacker to Houston at 167. He wasn't in my top 50, but he was my number 3 rated linebacker and probably just outside my 50 if I kept doing my rankings. Super lucky for him to go to a defense that's going to be coached by DeMeco Ryans, one of the better linebackers, true linebackers the NFL has seen. So, To'oTo'o, I think he'll learn a lot from DeMeco, and I think he'll end up being a modern, really good fit in the modern NFL, despite being a little undersized. And then he could be a guy where like, hey, he was picked in the 5th round. He's a 10-year starter. Like seriously, he could be that kind of guy. In round 6, I really literally could not decide between 2 players, so I just gave it to 2 guys. Kayshon Boutte at 187 to New England. Tell you what, that guy was number 30 on my big board. I thought it was crazy that he dropped as far as he did. I know there were some issues at LSU at the end there. Those all felt like new staff, some slight immaturity on his part, some weird sex things going on with people he shouldn't have been involved with, like things that probably will not impact him in the NFL. Ultimately, that's how I felt. And so for him to drop to the 6th round, I thought his talent was so good that I don't know how he dropped this far, but man, he gives Mac Jones a go-to target in the slot. And I think Bill O'Brien's going to be creative with how he can get him the ball. I think he's a Deebo Samuel light where he can put him in the backfield and hand it off to him. Like put him at the Y, run him to the flat, put him in the slot, put him outside, find different ways to get him the ball, jet sweeps, quick screens, all of it. Give him the ball. Let him work. And then the other guy was Deuce Vaughn at pick 212 to Dallas. He was number 31 on my big board. I know no one's higher on Deuce Vaughn than me. Like everything that I've seen, I've got to be his most patient supporter.
I feel that.
I would say I just love what he brings from a toughness and absolute just unbelievable ability to make people miss. I think he's going to be a freak with the Cowboys. I think they're going to have so many different ways they can use him, as the change of pace back to their Pro Bowl back that they have there right now.
Tony Pollard?
Yeah, to Pollard, No, Pollard. Zeke's gone.
Oh, was he? I thought he was there another year just chilling.
No, they let him roll on. Zeke's actually still a free agent, still hasn't signed with anyone, so we'll see what happens with that. But I mean, I also think the cool thing with Deuce is he got to get picked by the team that his dad works for. His dad's a scout for the Cowboys. Yeah. His dad actually got to call him the pick. I don't know if you saw that, but
yeah, I got to see it.
It's pretty cool.
Like, yo, do you want to come with me to work?
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. And so I really wanted the Rams to draft him because I thought I thought he's a special player. I think he's gonna make an NFL living out of just being a 3rd down back, a la Darren Sproles style. I really think that's what you're getting at pick 212, Darren Sproles. Yeah. So if what I'm saying, if that's what they're telling you you're getting, yeah, you'd be freaking out right now too, right? So I think that's what they're getting. And if he wasn't going to be picked by the Rams, I think it's cool he got picked by the Cowboys and he's going to get to work with his dad. Yeah. I also think the Cowboys got a steal. But the last one too, I would say D Winters, a couple picks later at 216 to San Francisco. Also a sneaky good pick. D Winters out of TCU, linebacker. And then in the 7th round, I had Ryan Hayes to Miami at 238. Really good pick for a guy that is a massive human being. I think he has the potential to be developed into a starter at tackle for them in the long term. They have some good tackles there, Teron Armstead. So right now, Ryan Hayes is probably just depth. But I think he could end up being a really awesome 7th round pick. Was just a road grader at Michigan, part of that Michigan O-line that won back-to-back Joe Moore Awards, best O-line in college football, back-to-back years. And then I also liked a couple Rams picks here in the 7th round. Ethan Evans out of Wingate, the punter. He was booming 80-yard punts on film, and it doesn't matter where you're punting at, punting translates. So he's a real punter out of Wingate. That's a fun find. And then Jason Taylor the second to the Rams at 234. He's a safety out of Oklahoma State, first team all Big 12, led the Big 12 in picks. The Rams just have a knack for finding and developing these like safeties in rounds 3 through 7. You go through the history: Rodney McLeod, John Johnson III, Lamarcus Joyner, the 2 guys who just left them, Nick Scott and Taylor Rapp. Like, these are all guys the Rams have drafted under Les Snead in those mid to late rounds, who have all been developed to the point where then they let them walk in free agency, they get a compensatory pick, and someone else pays them big money. So he just has been able to do this for years. So it would not surprise me in the slightest. Jason Taylor ends up being a really good player. He like I said, he had a good college career. A little bit smaller. I think that's maybe why he fell to round 7. But if Les Snead's drafting him, I feel pretty good about him being pretty good. So,
a quick note I should have brought up earlier. Did you see your guy Byron Young's going to be wearing number 0?
I did see that, and I love it. I did.
Yeah, I was like, oh, dang, that's sweet.
That number 0 is going to be coming around the corner. Bah-bah!
Yeah.
Getting after quarterbacks. I love it. I'm excited to see it. Let's see. I am kind of curious to know, Joe, like, we talked about some shock value and things like that, but like, I was curious, what surprised you about the draft the most? Like, what was the most surprising thing that happened to you?
Oh, I mean, the obvious one, right, was our guy Will Levis falling to day 2. But I could give you this one I just thought of right now. The Broncos picking up Riley Moss being a white cornerback.
The first white corner in the NFL in like 22 years or something like that. Like, I think it's like 22 years. A lot of people rejoiced, I guess.
Yeah. No, yeah. So those are. I was just looking at it. I was like, where are we going next? And that one also works. It plays.
It plays. I do. It was, in fact, surprising, and yet, I guess, exciting.
Yeah, I was asking Mitch about it because I seen him this past weekend. He was like, yeah, he looks solid.
Yeah, I mean, I got to see him a little bit at the Senior Bowl. He looked like he belonged. You know what I'm saying? He didn't look out of place. He didn't look like athletically he couldn't handle. I mean, he was a playmaker in college, so that's not shocking to see him be a legitimate NFL pick. So good for him.
Yeah. Let's see. Out of all the quarterbacks in the draft that were taken, who do you think has the chance to be the most successful?
Ooh, this is a good question. Well, I would say this. I think for me, it's probably either Bryce Young or Anthony Richardson. Just because they're both in really good places to be successful. And I right now, I think they both will be, which is the likelihood is one of them will be good and the other one won't. So we'll probably be able to look back on this podcast and say, well, you got that all wrong. You're an idiot. But right now, watching these 2 guys and seeing the environments they're in, I mean, I just think when it comes to quarterbacks in the draft, I think I'm more of a nurture than nature person in terms of this. Okay. Like, I think it matters more where you go than your talent itself. Because there's just way too many guys who have been so talented that have been drafted and it didn't work out. I think there's also guys where we could know, like, oh, that guy's talented, but he doesn't work very hard. He doesn't really care about football. He doesn't really love it. So he's not going to be good at that level because you have to love it and be a grinder to be Peyton Manning or Drew Brees or, you know what I'm saying? Like, those guys work 20 out of 24 hours a day on football. They still do, you know what I'm saying?
Honestly.
Yeah, they still do. Yeah, like, you can tell, right? So, like, there are certain guys that go back, and, like, I think I've even heard, like, a guy like Matt Leinart say, like, I didn't really love football. Like I liked playing it and I loved the
Yeah.
things that come from it, but like I didn't love it. Like and now like they have that hindsight and they can look back and they can admit that and they're okay with it because there's like Matt Leinart's got a great career. He's got a great life. He's not he's not sad about it, right? Like he can look back and say like, yeah, honestly, that's how I feel. So certainly there are certain guys like that you say, but like also I think there's an element to like some guys just go to the wrong situation.
Yeah.
And they just get eaten up before they can ever blossom into the right, into the quarterback they could have been. And so I do think that situation matters. And I think the Panthers and the Colts are about as close to as good a situation as you could be in. I mean, the Panthers specifically, you look at, they have a trio of quarterback friendly coaches, right? They have their head coach, Frank Reich, who's been associated with a million great quarterbacks from Peyton Manning to, Nick Foles. Then you have Thomas Brown as their offense coordinator. Most recently was the running backs coach with Sean McVay and the Rams, knows the whole Rams system. We all know that McVay system is very quarterback friendly. Then you have Josh McCown as the quarterbacks coach, who by all accounts and statements in the last couple of years is going to be a head coach because he's that good at what he does. A guy who played quarterback in the league, much like Frank Reich. So he's got guys who just understand the position all around him, understand how to make it easier on him, understand what it's like to play the position day to day, and are prepared to support him. I think that's huge, invaluable for Bryce Young. And the fact that all three of those guys put their stamp of approval on him lets me know that I feel very confident in the fact that I had him number one on my board. I think he's that guy. I think he will be for the Panthers. Also, throw in the fact that they went 7-10 last year and they had a good defense. They weren't the worst team in the NFL. They were close to the playoffs. Had a pretty good defense, chose not to trade Brian Burns, kept some other dudes like that in place. I think there's some good stuff here. I worry a little bit about maybe some of the weapons around him, and they could certainly upgrade some of that stuff. Mm-hmm. But in general, I think he's in a great place to succeed pretty quickly. Anthony Richardson with the Colts, very supportive head coach Shane Steichen, who helped develop Jalen Hurts, was the play caller for Jalen Hurts, the quarterback coach for Jalen Hurts. Like, I think in drafting Anthony Richardson, I would imagine Shane Steichen sees some shades of Jalen Hurts, hopefully.
Yeah.
And they can run a very similar offense to support him. They've got a true bell cow running back in Jonathan Taylor. They also have a veteran quarterback in place who I think is good enough to start some games early if Anthony Richardson isn't ready, still needs to get up to speed. Also knows the Shane Steichen offense, having been with him, Gardner Minshew, right? And I think they've got some pretty decent playmakers on defense that should be much improved. That should give him support. I think where our questions rise with the Colts are much like the Panthers, maybe some of their skilled players, they're guys that Anthony Richardson's going to be throwing to, trying to get the ball to. And then more so with the Colts than the Panthers. Up front, I do worry a little bit about the Colts. They never quite supported Andrew Luck. There's another example of the nurture part. Like Andrew Luck's talent was so great that he was able to overcome that bad offensive line for a while, but the injuries piled up. And imagine if Andrew Luck gets drafted to another team that supports him with an offensive line. He's still playing right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's in the middle of a Hall of Fame career right now, So that's another situation where you're like, dude, man, if they just supported him and given him some tools up front to protect him, and he wouldn't have taken so many shots. So the two guys, though, with that being said, that I feel like are in great positions to be supported are Bryce Young and Anthony Richardson.
Yeah. Did you happen to see that there was like some tampering apparently with the Commanders and Andrew Luck?
I think what that tells you is the Commanders were so desperate to find any quarterback, that they inquired about any and every possible. But maybe they called Peyton Manning last year too. I don't know. Yeah, they called them all, dude. They brought in Carson Wentz, but they probably talked to Big Ben and they talked to Andrew Luck and there was all the rumors about them like maybe wanting to get Lamar and and now they got Sam Howell. I mean, we'll see. I think that the Commanders know they don't really have a lot going on at quarterback. So, that's tough. What's even more funny is the Colts being petty and saying that they're going to investigate him for tampering.
Yeah. Like, dude, the dude's been out the league for like 3-4 years now.
Well, the Colts still technically own his rights. So, like, even though he's retired, He
If he
cannot
were to
talk to
come back, he'd
anybody.
have to be
Yeah.
on them.
Yes. Yes.
Uh,
So I was curious. We talked a lot. We've been very positive, right? And
Yeah.
this podcast is positive, but I am curious to know if there were any picks that you didn't like and why. If there was anything you didn't see or saw that you didn't like.
Yeah. I'll just say off top, the Packers with them taking Lucas Van Ness right out of Iowa. I mean, the way I see it, granted they're building up the defense, but the way I see it, if they're going with Jordan Love, they should have got him weapons. They just lost Lazard, Randall Cobb. I don't know. I think there's another receiver in there too. And if he's going to be your guy going forward, you might as well give him a chance, right? I don't know. It just didn't make sense to me. And another one I briefly want to mention was the Bears taking Darnell Wright. I mean, you mentioned it to me when we were texting about it. You're like, well, they got their guy. They went back twice and got their guy. But
Yeah.
had they stayed put, I feel like they could have got one of the top guys. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, that was their choice, and they liked it, so they're chilling.
Yeah, I mean, I will say again, this goes back to like where we had Darnell Wright.
Yeah,
I think third or fourth on when we were rating our tackles. Was he third, fourth?
I think he was probably third, maybe fourth.
Yeah.
So maybe we both switched him.
With the Bears, they may have watched his tape and said, "Oh, he's our favorite tackle."
Mm-hmm.
In terms of like fitting what they do. And that's what I meant when I said, hey, they probably got their guy. Like that was the guy they had targeted that they wanted. They knew they could trade back and get. So in that sense, that may prove to be a great pick for them. It may prove to be like, hey, Paris Johnson Jr. was better or Peter Skoronski was better. And hey, maybe they messed up. But from the standpoint of the Packers, I agree with you. I did not like the Lucas Van Ness pick. I'm not a big Lucas Van Ness fan. He was not in my top 5 edge players. I don't remember where I had him on my big board. I think I had him in the 40s, maybe late 30s. So for him to go at 13, I just thought was way too high. Way too high. I know there's potential there. I know he has some length that you can't coach, and there's some things there that you can't coach. And so from a certain standpoint, I get it. I just thought there were a lot better pass rushers they could have taken there. Like I would have been much more stoked for them if they take Nolan Smith there, or I don't know, Miles Murphy even. True. Not the biggest fan of that pick. From the standpoint of them needing to get Jordan Love weapons, though, I will say they drafted Luke Musgrave and Robert Kraft, the 2 tight ends. Or Tucker Kraft, I should say, not Robert Kraft. That's the owner of the Bills.
They got
the owner of the
Patriots now.
Yeah. No, they finally drafted an owner. The Packers do have an owner now. No, they drafted Tucker Kraft, not to be confused with Robert Kraft, the Patriots owner. So they did draft 2 tight ends to go with the 2 receivers they drafted last year, and Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs. So there's a little something there. They did pick them up some weapons later, but I do agree with you. I mean, it would have been fun to see them take Jackson Smith and Jigba, for instance.
Or something. Yeah.
But I didn't like that pick as much. I think the pick I disliked maybe even more the Jets at 15, drafting Will McDonald. Again, another pass rusher that I just wasn't as high on as a lot of other people. He was also not in my top 5 edge rushers.
Yeah, I didn't know who he was. I think I texted you. I was like, who's Old McDonald?
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that this is what I will say for him. Jim Nagy of the Senior Bowl raved about him. So that's usually a good sign for you. Jim Nagy, does a pretty good job with the Senior Bowl and all that stuff. I got to see a lot of that up close and personal. He does a great job. So if he's raving about him, that made me think twice about my own evaluation, to be honest with you. But I just think for those 2 guys, it was just too high, 13 and 15 to draft those pass rushers. So I don't know. We'll see, I guess. But yeah.
Let's see. Speaking of, what I thought was bad, and I guess I had a question for you. Do you think anyone fell into a different or a better situation than if they got drafted early on?
Ooh, yeah. I mentioned this briefly before, but Jalen Carter, I would say, got the luckiest in terms of falling. I mean, from a talent perspective, probably should have been a top 3 pick. Instead, he falls to 9, where the Eagles actually did trade up from 10 to 9 to make sure they got their guy. I think that's, a vote of confidence for him.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure there's a better team he could have gone to in the entire league. You look around in terms of infrastructure and ability to pair him with some former college teammates, some guys he knows, Jordan Davis, Keely Ringo, Nakobe Dean, Nolan Smith, guys who he's been to battle with and had success with. At least one, if not 2 national titles with those guys, right? And then an unbelievably strong group of veteran role models in terms of Fletcher Cox, who plays his position, by all accounts, one of the hardest working, perfect role model veterans in the league. And then another guy who fits that exact same description on the other side of the ball is Jason Kelsey at center. So a guy he's going to work with every day and a guy he's going to work against every day, who are just going to be able to help mold him, I think, along with the familiarity with the Georgia teammates and feeling comfortable in that space. And then a head coach that I think is going to help him be his best self, is going to empower him to be the best Jalen Carter. Nick Sirianni. I think a lot of players have talked about how much they love that guy, how genuine he is, how easy it is for him to connect with his players. I think that's going to be a real thing for Jalen Carter. And then lastly, in a place that's probably going to embrace him, Philly. Like Philly embraces athletes when they're producing for their teams, regardless of what might have happened. They will embrace those guys and make them feel like, you're one of us. Now, the minute he doesn't play well, they'll sick him. Yeah, he'll hear about it. But when he's playing well, they're going to embrace that guy and they're going to love him up and they're going to make him feel like like he belongs in Philly. I think there's no better place he could have gone to. So I think in terms of falling, if you were going to falling to 9 with the Eagles makes sense. And now we know why Howie Roseman, his agent, didn't, or blanking on his agent's name, not Howie Roseman. I'm messing up names left and right today. Sorry, everyone. Drew Rosenhaus, I believe, is his agent. And he said, we're not taking any calls or visits outside the top 10. Now we know why, because the Eagles were sitting there at 10 and likely said, hey, if you get here, we are taking you. And they liked him so much, they didn't even wait for him to get to 10. They traded up to 9 to make sure they got him. So also honorable mention with this is Joey Porter Jr. falling out of the first round, falling to 32 to the Steelers. I think that was a great situation for him as well.
Yeah.
But that's what I got. I mean, was there any others that stood out to you? I mean, we kind of talked a lot about guys falling, but
I don't know. I don't think so. I feel like if anything, it'd be more about the rise that I would talk about. That would surprise me more so than people falling. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think I have maybe one other question for you. Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you. How did the Broncos do with their draft? What did you think of the Broncos draft? As a resident Broncos fan of this podcast, tell me what you thought. I mean, we talked about Riley Moss.
Yeah,
we that.
We talked about that. I mean, we'll see. They're normally pretty good at corner. Like they had Surtain, they had Roby in the past. Yeah. So I'm curious to see how he plays. When I was watching him, he looked like he was quick at corner. He was getting picks for days on his highlights. That was nice. I mean, some of them, maybe he was a little out of position, but he still got it. But yeah, they got Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma. He looked like a deep ball threat. He plays receiver, so that was looking good. I mean, there's another team. They're another team that we know. We picked up Russ for the first round, I guess, if you want to do that. So that was tough not seeing them draft early, but they're there. Just like the Dolphins, they're there. We got Drew Sanders. He's a linebacker out of Arkansas. He looked like he's a good run game dude, and then good at QB spy or like zone, playing that middle of the zone. He looked good there. And then they got
Drew Sanders.
Huh? Oh, you like?
I like him. Yeah.
I thought you were gonna be like, I don't know what I thought you were gonna say, and then you're like, I like him. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I actually crunching more tape later down the road. I kind of regretted not having him in my top 5 linebackers. I think I like him better than I actually like Noah Sewell out of Oregon. And if I had to do it over again, I might flip those guys.
Cool. That's good to hear. Yeah. Let's see. They got J.L. Skinner out of Boise State. He's a safety. The only thing I had about him was his size. He looked pretty skinny out there, so he needs to get beefed up. But other than that, I mean, he was looking good. And their last pick of the draft, they got Alex Forsyth. I don't know if that's how you pronounce that. I'm sorry, bro. He's from Oregon. He played center. I didn't really look up on that. He's just got to worry about the run game for the most part. Or pass pro. As long as he can command, I guess the other dudes next to him too. That's another part of playing center. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was their draft. It seems solid. Like I said, the first 3 dudes, I definitely think there's a good shot for them to be good. And then Skinner, like I said, his size is gonna hold him back. And then Forsyth, I guess, just staying healthy, being on the line. That's the biggest issue for those dudes.
Yeah.
Let's see. My last question for you. I mean, we probably talked about it already, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. What was the biggest either surprise that you've seen either people trading up or trading back on that first day?
I mean, the most surprising one had to be the Texans trading up to 3, right? I mean, they select CJ Stroud at 2. We're like, oh no, we thought it was going to be Will Anderson. They really did like CJ. We thought we had heard Bryce Young is the guy. If they don't get him, they don't really like the quarterbacks. They're going to draft the defensive player. So it's Will Anderson or Tyree Wilson. And we felt like it was Will Anderson. And then, so for the longest time, we thought the Texans had to make a decision between quarterback or best available.
Yeah.
Right. So it's take quarterback here and then draft the best available at 12, or take the best defensive player and then hope a QB falls to 12. Yeah. And instead they said, the heck with all of it. We're going to get both. We're going to have our cake and eat it too. Right. We're going to draft the quarterback and then trade back up and take Will Anderson. They have since tried to come out and dispute this report that basically the front office and ownership were split on what they wanted to do. Where the front office and coaching staff wanted Will Anderson, and ownership wanted Stroud, and so this was their way of making both people happy, everyone in the organization happy. They've since come out and said ownership's been no, we didn't do that, we didn't force our guy, we let our guys do their job, XYZ. I mean, I don't know. There's probably some truth to it. You know what I mean? I mean, they probably did. I don't blame them though. At the same time, no one wanted to see another year of long neck at quarterback.
Davis Mills.
Davis Mills. And no offense to Davis Mills. I'm not, that's probably not fair of me to say, but I mean, he was not very good,
Yeah.
And he does have one of the thickest, longest necks I've ever seen on a dude. He's incredible. I don't know. He works that thing out or something. But, so anyway, I think, I think they were just tired of seeing that. And the Deshaun Watson whole situation. They haven't had a real quarterback feeling like this is the guy, the future of the franchise. And since they had Deshaun really playing for them, which was almost 4 years ago now, it feels like. So, but I do wonder if it's going to be the best move long-term doing what they did. I mean, I talked about it earlier a little bit, but I can give you more specifics. I mean, they gave up a massive haul at the jump from 12 to 3. Number 1, they give up number 12. They give up number 33.
Ooh.
Then they give up a 2024 first and a 2024 third in order to get to 3. And then they also got 105 in this year's draft. So you essentially gave up 2 firsts, a second, and a third to get Will Anderson in a 4th.
One you've never even seen in the league.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see if that gamble pays off long term when they could have taken Anderson. These are the kinds of trades that I think a GM like Les Snead sees and is like, dude, if that's what people are trading just to trade up to draft a player, I'm cool with trading away first-round picks to get guys like Jalen Ramsey and Matthew Stafford, who I know are productive NFL players. Yeah. So, but we'll see. Like I said, it's probably going to mean that, CJ and Will Anderson both have to be good. Because if not, I think the Texans are going to be kicking themselves. They better both be foundational centerpieces, man.
Yeah.
Because especially knowing what's in the quarterback draft class next year.
Yeah, Caleb Williams. I can mention other dudes, but I know that's the top.
Drake May. There's some real dudes in that. So, yeah, man. I don't know. We'll see what happens long term, but. Yeah.
I was gonna say, in terms of the now, I could hit you with the banger.
Oh yeah, banger of the week. Yeah, dude, we can't leave without banger of the week.
So, first question is: have you seen Guardians of the Galaxy?
I have not seen it yet.
Okay.
I'm like behind on Marvel. I have been for like the last couple years now. I'm like a movie behind. So when everyone's seeing Guardians of the Galaxy, like I still need to see
Ant-Man.
Ant-Man.
Yeah, me
And
too.
like
I skipped
when
it.
everyone when
I wasn't.
everyone was watching Ant-Man, I was like, oh, I'm just now watching Black Panther.
Yeah.
And then when everyone was watching Black Panther, I'm just now watching Thor.
Thor,
So
yeah. No,
I was
I could
behind.
agree with that. I could agree. I've been doing the same thing, except so I saw Thor, right? This is kind of related to the topic of the banger, but not really. So Thor came out. I was excited to go watch it. First Marvel movie in a minute, right?
Uh-huh.
Didn't hear good things about it. Let it roll until it came out on Disney. Let's see, Black Panther came out. I was like, I'm watching that one. I gotta go. So I went and seen that one.
Yeah.
And then
Which was
Ant-Man
great.
came out. Same thing. I was like, I gotta go watch it, right? Because now the sad part about Ant-Man, I don't want to sound mean, but that Mexican dude that's always making everyone laugh,
Uh-huh.
heard he wasn't in the movie. I was already sad. And then I hear people saying the movie's not that good. Haven't seen it. But now Guardians of the Galaxy comes out. It's like, gotta see that one. So I went with my mom on Friday. Now the only thing I'm really gonna say, I cried like 2 or 3 times. It's sad. It's a good movie. It's a good movie, but it's sad.
No, don't tell me that. Dang. All right, now I'm juiced up though to see it.
But I don't know
I'm
what else I
ready.
really want to say besides that
Yeah,
because
don't say that. Don't
it's
say
too
anything else.
good. You gotta
Oh,
go
dang.
watch for
Okay.
yourself to know how it
Okay.
goes.
Okay. I'll have to see it. I will. I'll have to see it. Man. Okay, I'm excited now.
Yeah, it's a
Super excited.
highly recommend. I will say that it's really good.
Okay.
It's just
Cool.
you might cry a little bit.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be back next week to talk the NFL schedule release.
Yeah.
And then moving forward, as we get into the offseason, Joe and I are going to be breaking down the divisions, getting you ready for the 2023 NFL season. We're getting to that dead time, right? The dead time of the offseason. Training camp will pick up here in about 2 months from now. And that's when, people will start being juiced up and excited.
We'll see some squabbles maybe.
Yeah, but until then, we'll keep you covered on updates. Things happening here and there in free agency, all that good stuff. But also, we'll be looking ahead and breaking down each division, talking about all the teams, where their improvements or declines happen in the offseason and kind of what we see going forward. But for today, we're going to go ahead and sign off. Let my guy Ray take us out.
Sir.